How's it going, everybody? Happy 4th of July. We've got a special one for you today. What better way to celebrate Independence Day than to highlight those keeping the American dream alive? Today we're sitting down with Seth Farbman, co-founder, chairman, and president of VStock Transfer. VStock Transfer is a SEC-registered stock transfer agent based in New York City, providing best-in-class service combined with a cost-saving structure to private and public companies. That's right, they're serving hundreds of public companies. Founded by lawyers and managed by lawyers to better service companies, counsel, and shareholders, VStock offers a unique combination of technology and proactive, energetic, personalized, and experienced customer service. This is ARTEEN ZAHIRI. I'm joined with my co-host, RUMEER KESHWANI. Let's jump right in. Well, Seth, thank you for joining. We'll kick it off. I'd love to first start with your background. If you for your audience, tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Of course, you started your career in securities law. So I'd love to learn about what got your interest initially generated with going down that route. And then once you were in the kind of securities law world, what got you to start to think about starting your own companies in the financial services sector?
Well, first of all, guys, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And to your credit, you know what? I've done a lot of podcasts over the years, and nobody's ever started like pre the first job, right? It's always been, okay, you're a securities lawyer and let's jump right in. Nobody ever said, well, why'd you want to be a securities attorney to begin with? So to your credit, I guess let's start in 11th grade. I was actually influenced by a teacher that I had. There was actually one of the rabbis in the school. He was just so impressive, and he was a part-time teacher and a part-time attorney. And I was just drawn to it. I was like, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be a lawyer. So it didn't last very long, but it set me down the path to go to law school. And as you had mentioned, I was a securities attorney for a couple of years. Hopefully nobody will hold that against me. And really focused on IPOs, companies that were raising capital, going on to the NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange. And that was sort of my forte into the business world.
That's awesome. And just expanding on that, so with some of the recent companies or some of the earlier companies you started, Vintage Filings, was that your first? Was that the first one you founded?
Yeah, basically. So when I was a securities attorney, I was helping all these companies draft their filings to go public. And at that point, you had to do something called an Edgar filing. You had to put it into a certain format to give it to the SEC. So, a buddy of mine said, hey, why don't you do it? And I was like, who does it themselves? You've got to outsource it. And, long story short, I ended up learning how to do it, and would go back to my clients and say, hey, listen, guys, for a fraction of the price, I'll do the Edgar filings for you since I'm writing the material anyway. And, we were in the right place at the right time with a lot of hustle. And shout out to my partner, Shai Stern, who was the driving force on the sales side. And honestly, guys, it was, the typical story. Slept on my couch for a couple months, gave the impression that we were 24/7 when really we were so busy that like I couldn't leave my desk. He would bring me pizza on like deadline days because I couldn't afford the 15 minutes to go out and grab lunch. And between 02 and 07, we grew it to about 4,000 public companies, and had our first exit. We sold to PR Newswire in 2007.
That's an amazing story and pretty good segue into something I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned at the end there, you grew the company successfully, you had to exit, sold to PR Newswire. And then I saw recently you also sold another company you founded, V Corp Services, to Wolters Kluwer. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this process of an exit, selling a company from the founder perspective. What goes into that? And this is different for you. I know this varies based on industry, but there's also that question of a founder. Should I be pursuing the IPO or should I be pursuing the acquisition exit? What are your thoughts around that, especially as it related to your perspective?
Right. And that is a great question, right? I mean, there are different paths, I guess, to break it down, whether or not I want to go IPO, whether or not I want to raise capital through private equity or VC, or do I want to sell the company? So I guess, Arteza, to address your first question, that pathway is I'm sure different for everybody. And even when we start a company, we had that sale from V Corp to Walters Clore, and we had another sale. We had VCheck to Sunstone Private Equity. And so I'd like to make it clear, like, I never wake up and say, okay, I'm going to start a company. We're going to work on it for 2 years, 7 years, 9 years, and here's the strategy to get out. And I think that anybody that starts a company with the goal to get out may never make it there, right? In other words, so I know for myself and my partners, and for me, that was the goal, is to surround yourself with great partners. The goal was wake up every day, push 120%, make as much money as you can, turn it into a cash cow, if possible. And if you do that, then chances are pretty good that people are going to come knocking, and then you have that opportunity to explore, which route you want to go. Do I want to sell? Do I want to take in additional capital? And we were blessed that that's really what's always happened, but never just like, okay, let's start a company. And I've been pitched that, like, I had somebody sitting in my office and they said, okay, I'm starting this company, we're raising capital, and here's the 5-year strategy to exit. I was like, if you've got your exit strategy on day one, I don't necessarily know if you're going to make it there. And so it's an exciting journey to go from idea and development, growth, scale to that day of exit.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think it makes sense, right? Like we've heard this before, like with a lot of other founders, right? Like it's never a good sign when they're entering a business looking to exit right from the start. Like it's kind of like adverse to what, like, the idea of like building something that'll last. But it's funny because if you build something that'll last, people are more interested in it, right? So you do have kind of that inverse relationship there.
Yeah, like you said, and most often what I think happens is you probably even say no the first couple of times. I mean, I know we did.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you're doing it right, then it's that struggle, like, well, things are going in the right direction. Do I really want to sell, or do I want to keep pushing and see how far I can get this? So all those questions come up on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, like, when I guess, like, just to dig a little bit deeper into like the company building process is like, what are some of like the common pitfalls, like maybe perhaps selling too early is one of them, right? That you feel like you kind of engaged with as a founder, or that you've seen you've worked with a variety of companies, right, over the years. I'm sure you've heard a lot of war stories from people who have built companies and that are taking them public, or maybe built a company that failed or that they kind of messed up on. Like, what are some of the common pitfalls you feel like entrepreneurs typically find themselves in when they're kind of company building and they're faced with these tough questions, right? Like whether or not to sell, or like, whether or not they're surrounding themselves with the right partners, things of this nature.
I think we may have to have like a 5-part series for this podcast to cover everything. But no, listen, I can definitely, there's a long list of mistakes and challenges that we've made over the years. For me, the companies that we've always been involved with are companies that we started to plug up a pain point, right? I mean, for me, there's a very big difference between a company or a product or a service that is a luxury item, and some of them do really well. But then there's another one where it's like there's a huge pain in an industry, whatever that industry is. And as cliche as it sounds, but you wake up and you say, okay, there's got to be a better way or a better solution. And, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs are running around trying to come up with, this novel idea or something that nobody's ever thought of, and running around trying to come up with patents. At the end of the day, at least for me, the companies that I've been involved with and I've been able to have some success with are not necessarily luxury items. They're things that are just very not sexy, very boring. But they're things that we said, okay, well, I think that we could do that same thing, but we could do it better, faster, cheaper, more effectively. And it doesn't sound so exciting, but sometimes those are the best businesses, and just be authentic when you're going down that path. And when you're doing something that's novel and new and nobody's ever done it before, that's sometimes a huge challenge, because what people don't recognize is that with that comes the entire challenge of education. And every bit of your marketing, instead of going into selling per se and picking up new customers, is educating the market and say, no, but let me explain to you why there's a need. Well, if you have to explain why there's a need, or let me explain how it works because people have never heard of it before, then that's a bit of an uphill battle. At the same time, I'm the first to admit, while I might have had a little bit of success in growing businesses, I know that both of you have had, background in investment banking, venture capital. There's a reason I'm not an investment banker or in venture capital, because like I had a guy come to us maybe 10, 15 years ago by now. He's like, oh, I've got this great company. I've got, flavoring, and I'm going to put it into my seltzer. And I was like, no. I've got my Starbucks and I've got my Diet Pepsi. And I think your idea is miserable. Fast forward, he was the CEO of SodaStream. Now it's a $1 billion company. So like, you've got to know your strengths and weaknesses. I know that I cannot tell what companies are going to be a hero and a zero, because for me, that was just like a new concept. And as I said, that education part is sometimes the failure of some entrepreneurs.
Yeah, as someone who's like worked in emerging tech, like I definitely resonate with this whole education, like coming in front of selling, like concept. Like it's very poignant, and it's like very like front and center for me at least. Like, so I think you totally hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, great insight, Seth. And funny you mentioned understanding your strengths and weaknesses. One of your strengths, of course, is the IPO filing process. That's, your bread and butter. You understand that very well with VStock Transfer and your work there. I wanted to get your take, if you could provide some commentary on some of the trends and changes that have happened in this space. I know a couple years ago, SPACs were extremely popular, and then there was kind of a whole crash and burn, rise and fall with the SPAC market. There's been a few notable direct listings. What are some changes you've noticed, and just what are your thoughts around these, dynamics?
Sure. And once again, shout out and credit to you for doing your homework. Those nuances are not necessarily recognized by the investment community. Very often people just throw that whole category of IPO into one bucket. But yeah, and there are different categories of companies that are going public, and how they go public, and why, and what are the benefits, and how are they raising money. And like you had mentioned, I think that the SPAC market, I don't want to say it's come and gone, because we're still in it a bit, but obviously I think the peaks have shown themselves. What I would say to your listeners right now, and I do feel like, although I said I'm not a banker, but I do feel like I'm sitting in a unique position where I get a sense of the pulse of the market. I mean, with VStock Transfer right now, as a transfer agent, we work with about 800 issuers, and our real focus are IPOs. So we get a sense of what's going on. And here's my sense. Here's the inside scoop, without it being inside. I spent a tremendous amount of time, I'd say over the last 4 months in particular, on foreign issuers. We have Zooms early morning, late night, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam. It's something I never really had prior to that. My 10 p.m. and my 11 p.m. were mine up until recently. Not anymore. So I feel like there's this that element is brewing, and we just sponsored a conference actually in Singapore. I'm appreciative to David Mansbach from our office, who did the 19-hour trip. But that's where I think the next part of the industry is going to be hot.
Okay, wait, I actually want to drill in on this. I was having a conversation with one of my friends who, and I don't know, you tell me how related this is, but I'm curious to know a couple of things, right? One is like, when did you kind of see this trend starting? And two, the reason why I'm interested in this is because I basically read some about how a lot of foreign I don't know, I guess like conglomerates, or like people who are forming capital abroad, are kind of like setting up what is it, like investment companies or like holding companies to invest in the US stock market. And there was like a recent like uptick in this kind of like after 2020, 2021, this kind of happened a lot with like tens of thousands of companies kind of being formed. So I'm curious to know if like this is kind of the trend you're referring to, and like when did you see this start, and like, you know, if you could just kind of elaborate a little bit more on this, because I think it's pretty
Yeah, I
interesting.
mean, I don't think I think it's been the last couple months. I mean, listen, there's always been foreign issuers, right? I mean, we've always been, providing services to foreign issuers. And that runs the gamut, right? I mean, we have clients in Australia and Israel and Canada, although it's not the same category as a foreign issuers, but that's been going on, all along. But I definitely feel I'd say 4 months, like the last 4 or 5 months, I'm just feeling this overwhelming interest. And what's interesting is that it's sort of counter to the way the rest of the U.S. markets are going, right? Because the IPOs have somewhat slowed down. We're busy, and everybody's still doing what they do to start the process. But I feel like to your point, I don't think I would have insight to the shareholder component of it, where they're forming these investment groups, because our relationships are generally directly with the CEO and the CFO. And why are they coming to the US? I feel like they have access to the capital wherever they're based, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of these CEOs, to their credit, not only do they have phenomenal technology and a great story, but I feel like they do have access to capital in Singapore and Malaysia. So why come to the US? My guess is it's just like there's, besides the excitement of listing on NASDAQ, why does anybody go public? It's using that stock as a currency to do acquisition. It's using that stock as a currency to hire talent. I think that there's just there's an attraction of listing, in the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ or the OTC markets, whatever is most appropriate for you as an issuer. That's just capturing their attention.
Super interesting thoughts there. Yeah, no, I think I would really appreciate the thoughts on the public market. And by the way, I noticed behind you, you have the first Reg A plus to list on the New York Stock Exchange.
We haven't focused on Reg A plus. I know that there've been a lot of changes recently, but the picture in the background was Myomo. They were the first Reg A listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So thanks to Mark Alinowitz for giving me that as the deal gift.
Okay,
and
nice.
then we did Shift Pixie on the first Reg A on NASDAQ. So that was a big deal at the time when people wanted to raise small amounts of money from a lot of different people instead of, one $75-100 million transaction from the investment banking firms themselves. The challenge with that is you're dealing with a lot of mom and pops who this is maybe their first time investing.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. Is kind of what's the process of, because then you're kind of in the education business with these people that have little to no investment experience. You have to kind of educate them in terms of what this process entails, what's the risk associated with it, what's going to happen to their money, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And on both sides of the coin, meaning the Reg A's that I think have been most successful are from the investors that they relate to the product or they relate to the company as a consumer, right? So if it's a Kathy Ireland deal, they love Kathy, so they're going to invest in that company. Or if they like that product, some of the most successful Reg A's were companies that had tens and tens of thousands of followers already. On the flip side of that, as a transfer agent, it does make it more challenging for us because, not in a bad way, but we are speaking to uneducated investors. And so these are people that would call up and say, hey, I put $500 into this deal, sell my stock. And then we've got to explain to them, well, we're not a broker dealer. You've got to go open up an account with a broker. We're just the transfer agent. What's the difference between a physical certificate and the electronic certificate? So, this is exciting for them. But when you're dealing, I think one of our clients on the Reg A side had 22,000 individual mom and pop investors. And it's never a dull moment.
No, that's really cool. Last few minutes, Rumir, is there anything else you wanted to ask Seth?
Yeah, for sure. I guess we talked a little bit about like the company building process. I mean, I'm curious to know like if you've kind of maintained, I love asking this question, right? Any habits or hobbies like outside of the business place or outside of like your actual like work, your workplace, that you think kind of like helped keep you grounded or like helped kind of make you successful, and like if you think that there are any like key habits or hobbies that you feel like entrepreneurs in general should maintain like as they're building to kind of like make sure that they're clear-headed and that they don't fall into any of the pitfalls that we kind of talked about earlier.
That's a great question. I think it probably comes down to each person's why. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you building the company? Why are you working so hard or not working so hard? Listen, you had mentioned that we sold V Corp. I'll tell you totally, authentic. The day we sold V Corp, the next morning, I was at a conference and I was putting together the booth for VStock, like figuring out how to put the banner up and the skirt. And I was like, I can't believe I just had an exit yesterday and I'm doing this myself, trying to figure it out. But I was there because I loved what I do. I still love what I do. And, I'm not going to say my why isn't going after financial gain, but at the end of the day, if you love what you do, as cliche as it sounds, you're not working a day in your life, you're having fun. But yeah, I mean, you always want to make sure you still have time for family, time to exercise. Anybody who knows me knows that I try to play basketball twice a week, 3 times a week. If you even call it playing basketball anymore, I'm happy if I hit a couple shots. I've got kids. That's why you got to work so hard, pay for tuition. And then I just love marketing, media, storytelling, hearing other people's journeys. So if you mix it all into one big basket, then you're just doing what you love day and night. Hopefully that's incentive to keep down the path.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said, Seth. Last question I'd like to ask you, because I want to kind of bring it back to the beginning. You first mentioned you got into the whole securities thing with the law from inspiration from your 11th grade teacher. So he was one of your earliest role models. I'd love to know if you have any other role models or people you looked up to in business or elsewhere that you'd want to give a shout out to, or if there's any kind of public figures, authors, inspirational people you think our audience should go and check out.
Wow, I should have had these questions beforehand to prepare. Okay. Well, I'd say first and foremost, just an appreciation shout out goes to my partner, Shai Stern, who we had some of these exits together, and really started the first company, Vintage Filings, together. And Yoel Goldfeder is my current partner, who puts up with me and I put up with him. But we both felt it's the zig and the zag and the yin and the yang. Each one has its strengths, and so I couldn't do what he does, and he couldn't do what I do. So I appreciate him and Shai, and just over the years, the people. I regret not having more mentors in my life where I could have just gone over to them and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do you think would be the best thing? So for all your listeners, I think that's super, super important. Learn from my mistakes of not having had that. And I would also suggest there's a book called The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, and you should definitely go out and read that. And that book definitely changed my life, just in terms of the way I conduct business, that it's all about giving to others and offering value. Whether it's in business, whether it's with clients, whether it's social media, providing valuable content. That book, Go Giver, definitely changed the way I do business. So yeah, I would put those out as my answer.
And that's a wrap on the podcast, folks. Thank you so much to Seth for coming in, dropping amazing insights, telling his inspiring story. Definitely go out and buy a copy of The Go-Giver if you haven't already. This is a timeless classic, truly inspiring. Congratulations to Seth on all of the success. Seth would like to let all of you know that he's available to be reached at on LinkedIn. We will have his LinkedIn in the description. Seth mentioned that he loves telling his story, and he also loves hearing about other people's stories. So definitely go and connect with Seth. Thank you all for tuning in. Please make make sure to follow Startup Society on social media and subscribe to our newsletter on Substack. You can see all the links here on the screen or in the description if you're listening to the audio podcast. Folks, thank you so much. Have an amazing holiday. Enjoy the 4th of July with friends and family. Until next time, take care.